The state government's being blamed for a taxi crisis in Hobart, with claims it's making millions selling cab licences despite an oversupply. The taxi industry says some operators are going broke and drivers are earning as little as $3 an hour. They say a licence buyback scheme is needed, but the government's not listening. It's just put more licences out for tender. Tamara Glumac reports.
You'll rarely struggle to find a taxi in Hobart these days. The city has one of the highest number of cabs per capita in Australia.
So the national average states that one taxi per 1,000 head of population is good. That's viable for the industry Australia-wide. We're currently on one taxi per 650 head of population.
While it's good news for the average commuter, the oversupply is coming at a cost.
Operators going broke. I can't put it much more simple than that.
Look, you're looking anywhere between, say, $50 right through to $80 for the entire shift. And a shift can run anywhere from 8 hours through to maybe even 14. Heck, you know, some drivers even do 24 hours. It's pretty ludicrous.
The state government introduced new taxi legislation in 2008, following a 2-year review. The changes meant the sale of more owner-operated taxi licences. At the time, the industry warned the influx of new players would flood the taxi market, impacting on existing operators. The Tasmanian Taxi Association's Roger Burden says that's now the reality. He runs his own cab company and in the past 6 months has taken on an extra 10 licences handed in by struggling operators.
You'll notice if you pick up the paper any time now that there's beginning to be licences for lease. Some vehicles, some taxis you see in the back window, licence for lease, car for sale, drivers wanted, to which we didn't have before.
John McRae is selling his taxi licence after 8 years in the industry, saying it's nearly impossible to make a living.
Well, I've had to turn to other forms of employment. My wife's working. When my relative was, when he was involved in the industry, he supported a family of 2 children and a wife. His wife's never worked.
He says the government's flooded the market with licences, plus is charging an annual licence administration fee of more than $600.
We're not seeing any return for that. All we're seeing is a reduction in income from the introduction of more plates. It's just a shame to see the industry deteriorate. You speak to a lot of our more senior drivers and that have been around and they've seen it decline. But they've seen the costs, etc., keep on increasing. So there's too many plates for the population.
State government figures show there are 313 taxi licences in Hobart. 56 have been issued in the past 4 years. They've been put out for tender at a starting price of $60,000, pouring millions into state coffers.
It's generated a fair old bit of revenue for the government over the few years that we actually haven't seen any of that money come back to our industry in any way, shape or form.
Only 5 of the 13 licences offered in last year's tender were purchased, but the government has already advertised more for sale this year. Meanwhile, drivers like John Badenak continue to roam the city streets in search of work, earning as little as $3 an hour on a slow day.
I've sometimes sat on a rank for nearly 2 hours, if not more, and the only reason why I would have got off to that rank would be because my dispatcher sent me a job. A lot of people who are in smaller companies or are private, they just wait for the fare, and sometimes they can be waiting for hours on end.
It's a waiting game that's clogging infrastructure.
We don't have enough ranks to park the taxis. Okay, so they're parked around the corner somewhere, or they just keep circulating around the block until they can find a spot on the rank. Like they're literally chock-a-block.
It's reasonably common to probably have to do 2 or 3 laps of the city to get on a rank. So there's certainly a surplus of cabs there during the day, because it's the same situation out at the airport.
The industry has called on the state government to buy back licences rather than sell more.
I believe that the state government definitely has a role to play in this. They've released too many plates over a period of time, and as a result, a lot of people have bought taxis thinking it was a viable industry to get into, which when I first started, yeah, it was. But nowadays, it's definitely not. It's not one that you'd want to be getting into, it's certainly not starting out in.
The Transport Minister, Nick McKim, declined an interview request by 730 Tasmania, nor would the Department of Infrastructure, Energy and Resources put anyone up for comment. The department did put out a statement saying taxi licences have sold due to demand and there's no compulsion to buy them. It says it's planning to review the licence release process. But cabbies say their calls for change have fallen on deaf ears and they're not ruling out strike action.
I don't think anybody understands how much of an impact the taxi industry has on day-to-day living of the average Tasmanian, if you like. Like, so many people rely on us to get from A to B, or just even if it's to go for a drive. If everyone was to stop for a day and park their taxi, the town would come to a halt.